All stories posted on our channel are stories from our subscribers and created by us based on real events we've experienced and witnessed. We post new stories every day for your entertainment, that we hope you enjoy them. Thank you.
The thing about betrayal is, it doesn't always come dressed in drama. Sometimes it shows up quietly, like a creak on the stairs, like a door shutting behind you. It was a rainy Tuesday, not a thunderstorm, not romantic rain, just that depressing gray drizzle that makes you feel like the universe hit the dimmer switch on your life. I had just finished a rough meeting with a Florida client who decided, mid-contract, to go in a different direction, which in my world is corporate speak for, we found someone cheaper. I took the long way home, stopped at a gas station just to sit in the car for 10 extra minutes. I didn't want to go home yet, and I couldn't explain why. Claire and I had been married for 9 years. No kids, though not for lack of trying. We had our moments. The kind of couple who took those dumb cooking classes at first, then slowly graduated into separate Netflix profiles and distant bedtime routines. I'm not going to lie and say I was perfect, but I wasn't cruel. I didn't cheat. I didn't disappear into video games or some fantasy world. I was just tired. She was too. Marriage has a way of wearing you down like a stone in a river, slow and quiet. When I walked through the front door that night, I smelled bleach. That was the first red flag. Claire only cleaned when she was mad. She stood at the end of the hallway, hands in the pockets of her gray cardigan. Her dark hair was pulled back in that messy bun she always did when she didn't want to try. Her expression wasn't angry, it was blank, like she was standing at a cliff's edge, thinking about whether to jump or push someone else off. "Go to the guest room," she said. No greeting, no context. I let out a nervous laugh. Why? She didn't move, just stared at me like I was a fly on her wall. Go. I thought maybe she needed space. Maybe she was on one of those TikTok therapist kicks again, the kind that starts with boundaries and ends with you sleeping on the couch. I sighed and headed down the hallway. The guest room had recently been redone. Blue walls, new blackout curtains, a queen-sized bed we hadn't used since her mother's last visit. I stepped in, dropped my laptop bag on the chair, and turned around to ask her what the hell this was all about. Before I could speak, the door shut. Click. I tried the knob. Locked. I froze. Claire. Silence. I knocked once. Then again, louder. "Claire, what are you doing?" Her voice came muffled through the wood. "This is your punishment." I laughed, short and bitter. "Punishment for what?" No response. I knocked again, harder this time. "Claire, this isn't funny." Still nothing. I rattled the handle. It didn't budge. I leaned down and saw the keyhole. Not one of those modern push locks. A legit lock and key setup, installed recently, judging by the shiny metal. That door used to be free-swinging. We only added the lock after her cousin crashed here for 2 months and freaked out over privacy. Now, it was being used against me. "Claire?" Open the door. Footsteps. Then silence. I felt like a zoo animal. My own house suddenly felt like a cage. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the door as if it would magically open. My phone was in my jacket, which I'd tossed on the dining chair when I walked in. My Apple Watch was dead. No windows in the guest room opened all the way. Safety latches. The TV had been unplugged. No remote in sight. No books, no magazines, nothing. It was intentional. An hour passed. Then 2. At some point, I heard her footsteps return. I rushed to the door. "Claire, please, just tell me what's going on." What did I do? A soft scrape. Something slid under the door. A paper plate with a sandwich. No napkin. A bottle of water. I didn't know whether to laugh or scream. "Claire, are you serious right now? This is insane." Silence. The sandwich was turkey and mustard. She knew I hated mustard. It was petty, surgical, like she was dissecting my patience one slice of bread at a time. I paced the room, tried to stay calm. This had to be some kind of psychological, one of those weird tests where she wanted me to realize something deep and life-changing. Maybe she wanted an apology I didn't know I owed her. Maybe she read some quote online about removing the poison from your life and decided to treat me like a toxin. By midnight, I gave up trying to get out. I lay on the bed fully clothed, jacketless, cold, and confused. I stared at the ceiling and thought about every argument we'd had in the past 6 months. Nothing stood out. I hadn't touched another woman. I hadn't gambled or hidden money. I hadn't said anything unforgivable. I just stopped trying as hard. Was that my crime? The floor creaked once more. No footsteps this time. I spoke softly. "Claire, please, talk to me." Nothing. I closed my eyes. Not to sleep, but to pretend I was somewhere else. A cabin, a hotel, a place I chose to be. But even my imagination couldn't make that room feel anything less than a prison. The next morning, she opened the door at 7:03 a.m. I didn't move. She stood there holding a steaming mug of coffee, hers, not mine. She sipped it calmly, like a prison warden doing her morning inspection. "I'm going to work now," she said. "Are you okay?" I asked, voice dry from sleep and confusion. She stared at me for a long beat, then, as if reading from a script, said, "You have the day to think about what you've done." I stood slowly. "Claire, what have I done?" She smiled, but not the kind that means warmth. It was the kind that follows a car crash. Numb, delayed, surreal. "You'll figure it out." And just like that, the door shut again. You can survive being ignored for a while. The first few hours, your mind stays occupied trying to figure out the why, like there's a riddle behind, a message in the madness. By the second day, you're not solving anything. You're just trying to keep your mind from unraveling. She didn't let me out that entire day. I didn't know if she was home or had left. The silence was total, and the hours stretched long, heavy, each one pressing down on me like a cinder block on the chest. At some point in the afternoon, another plate appeared under the door. This time, peanut butter on white bread, no jelly, no drink. It felt like punishment in culinary. Claire knew I was allergic to peanuts. Not fatally, just enough to swell up and itch like hell. She wasn't trying to kill me, she just wanted me to feel it. It was deliberate. She wanted me uncomfortable, off balance. She was punishing me with intimacy in reverse, knowing someone so well that you could hurt them with precision. I knocked again, begged, whispered through the door like a prisoner trying to connect with their captor. No response. That night the room felt like a coffin. I didn't sleep. I just lay there, tracing cracks in the ceiling and listening for footsteps. There weren't any. She didn't come back. No late-night stomps. No crying. No pacing. It was worse than noise. It was nothingness. By the third day, I stopped yelling. There's only so many times you can scream someone's name before you start to feel embarrassed. Even when there's no one to see you. Even when you're locked away like some forgotten pet. But the silence didn't stop the questions. Was she having an affair? Was this her way of making me the villain before she left me? Was she sick? Mentally, Claire had struggled before. Anxiety, a rough childhood. Her father once disappeared for a week without telling anyone. She called it the ghost phase. Maybe she was recreating it, only this time, she was the one doing the vanishing. I thought about calling the police. But with what? My phone was still out there, probably off, maybe hidden. She was too smart to leave me anything useful. The guest room had no computer, no cords, nothing. If I broke the window, I could scream for help. But we lived in the suburbs. 10-foot fences, nosy neighbors, HOA bylaws that made everything quiet and dead during weekdays. No one would hear. And even if they did, what would I say? My wife locked me in our guest room and feeds me cold sandwiches twice a day? I'd sound insane. Or worse. Like I deserved it. The weirdest part? I started believing maybe I did deserve it. It's funny what isolation does to you. After a while, guilt sneaks in. Even if you didn't do anything. You start going over your entire marriage like it's evidence in a trial you didn't know was happening. Every ignored text. Every missed date night. Every time she said, "You never listen," and you replied with, "I heard you fine." By day 4, I was talking to the wall, not in a crazy way, just in a desperate, lonely, human way. I started reciting jokes out loud, trying to keep myself anchored to something. I told the empty room about the time we got lost in Vermont, and Claire screamed at the GPS. I replayed our honeymoon in Charleston, the smell of fried food and sea air. I even reenacted the moment we got engaged, her in shock, me on one knee, ring upside down. She didn't answer, but I hoped she was listening. On the 5th night, I heard the door unlock. My pulse jumped like a car engine turning over after being frozen. Claire opened the door. She stood there in a black hoodie and jeans, holding a small envelope. Her eyes were glassy. Not red, not puffy, just cold. "Jason," she said, "I need you to sign this." She stepped into the room and handed me the envelope. I opened it. Inside was a notarized letter of separation. No lawyers yet. No divorce papers. Just a printed agreement. Bullet points. Conditions. I stay in the house. You go to your brother's place in Baltimore. You don't come back until I say so. No police. No contact unless it's email. I stared at her. "Claire, what the hell is this?" "It's what you've earned," she said. "I didn't cheat on you. I didn't hit you. I didn't lie. Why are you doing this?" She looked at me then, really looked, like she wanted to say something real, but it passed in a flash, and she clicked back in that blank stare. "You don't get it, and maybe you never will." "Then explain it to me," I said. "Give me one reason." She shook her head. "You broke more than vows, Jason. You broke the air between us." I didn't know what that meant. I still don't. But I signed the paper. Not because I agreed, because I was exhausted and scared, and because some small voice inside me said, "If you don't, this gets worse." She left me a duffel bag with clean clothes, my car keys, my wallet. I left the house at 2:13 a.m. I didn't sleep that night. I drove to a gas station, parked behind the dumpster, and just sat there with the engine run. I didn't call my brother. Didn't call anyone. I didn't know how to explain what happened. My wife locked me in a room and starved me with sandwiches until I signed myself out of my own life. Doesn't exactly roll off the tongue. I checked my email. There was a message from her. One line. Don't contact me. We'll talk when the court date is set. I stared at that message for hours. And then I realized, whatever came next, I was going to war with someone who already knew how to break me. There's something humiliating about being told when and how to show up to a fight you didn't ask for. 3 weeks after Claire locked me in that room and dumped me out of our life like a piece of spoiled meat, I stood in a courthouse waiting room staring at the clock, trying not to chew the inside of my cheek raw. The email from her lawyer had been cold, clinical. Initial hearings scheduled for Monday 9 a.m. King County Courthouse. That was it. No message from Claire. No apology. No context. I hadn't seen her since the night she unlocked the guest room and made me sign the separation agreement under emotional blackmail. Since then, I'd been crashing on my brother Noah's couch in Baltimore, half living out of a duffel bag, pretending to be fine, telling his kids, Uncle Jay's just on vacation, when in truth I felt like I was on house arrest in someone else's life. I hadn't hired a lawyer yet. Dumb? Absolutely. But part of me still believed she'd come to her senses. That she'd explain, maybe even apologize. That whatever was broken between us could be glued back together with enough time and some half-decent therapy. The night before the hearing, I almost didn't set my alarm. A stupid, stubborn piece of me thought, don't go. Let her see what it's like when you disappear. But I did go, and she was already there when I walked in. Claire sat on the other side of the room, back straight, eyes locked on her phone. She wore a navy blue blazer, heels I didn't recognize, and her hair was down, sleek and ironed flat. Her face was unreadable. No anger, no sorrow, just presence. She looked like someone who'd already moved on. Her attorney was a tall woman in a red pantsuit who looked like she drank espresso for sport and filed motions for fun. I sat alone. No legal counsel, no folder, no plan. The bailiff called our names. I followed them into the courtroom, heart hammering like I'd swallowed a war drum. The judge was a tired-looking man with glasses halfway down his nose. He glanced at the paperwork and raised an eyebrow. Mr. Reese, are you representing yourself today? Yes, Your Honor. Claire didn't look at me. The proceedings began with her attorney speaking. Her voice was smooth but sharp. She painted a portrait of a neglected, emotionally starved wife, of a man who'd grown cold, distant, dismissive, of nights spent in isolation, of birthdays forgotten, anniversaries ignored. She stopped just shy of calling me a villain, but her tone dripped with crafted tragedy. Claire didn't flinch once. She just nodded when appropriate, as if affirming a list of facts, not feelings. Then the judge looked at me. Mr. Reese, would you like to respond? I stood slowly. My throat was dry, but my voice held steady. I was locked in a room for 5 days. The courtroom went still. I glanced at Claire. Her face twitched. Barely, but it was there. The first crack in the mask. She didn't just ask me to leave, I continued. She physically locked me in a room with no phone, no communication, no explanation. I was fed twice a day through the crack of a door. I wasn't told what I did wrong. I was just confined, like an animal. The judge raised an eyebrow, eyes flicking to Claire, then to her lawyer. Ms. Caro? Her attorney's voice was ice cold. Mr. Reese was not imprisoned. My client requested space, and Mr. Reese agreed to spend a few days in the guest room. She provided food, water, and opened the door after he signed a mutually agreed separation notice. I laughed, loud, bitter. Agreed? What part of being locked in a room is agreement? I signed that letter because I was exhausted, confused, and borderline terrified. Claire finally looked at me then, for the first time in weeks. Her expression cracked, not with guilt, not with regret, but with something that almost resembled fear, but not of me, of losing control. The judge leaned back. Let me get this straight. Ms. Reese, did you physically lock your husband in a room? Her lawyer interjected. With respect, Your Honor, we don't believe the term lock accurately reflects yes or no. The judge cut her off. Claire didn't speak for a moment. Then quietly, the judge sighed. That's not typical behavior in separation cases, Ms. Reese. I was trying to protect myself, she said suddenly, eyes sharp now. He was emotionally distant, dismissive. I felt invisible. I was trying to make him understand. I stepped forward. So you decided to imprison me? She shook her head. I didn't hurt you. I just needed to be heard. The judge looked from her to me. I'm putting a temporary pause on this petition. Mr. Reese, I suggest you get representation. Ms. Reese, locking someone in a room is a serious matter. I'll schedule a second hearing in 3 weeks. Until then, no new legal actions. The gavel came down with a hollow thud, the kind that reverberates in your bones. The room emptied quickly. Claire stayed seated. Her attorney leaned in, whispered something, then walked away. I stood at the edge of the room, watching her like someone watching a house burn, not knowing if it was better to run or just let it collapse. She finally stood and approached me. Her voice was soft. You weren't supposed to show up. I blinked. What? I thought you'd disappear like always. Claire, what happened to you? She looked at me, really looked, and for a second, I saw the woman I married. The girl who used to drag me to food trucks, who hated silent car rides, who cried at documentaries. She was still in there, buried under layers of bitterness and unmet expectations. I broke, she said quietly, and I wanted you to. You didn't break, I replied. You decided, you planned, you executed. That wasn't a breakdown, that was punishment. She didn't deny it, just said, maybe. I should have walked away. I should have let her sit in the courtroom, stewing in the wreckage, but some twisted part of me still needed closure, still wanted to believe this was salvageable. What now? I asked. She hesitated, and then she said the one thing I never expected. I didn't think you'd fight me. I thought you'd just let me win. I stared at her. Claire, this isn't a competition, isn't it? She whispered. Because if it's not, why do I feel like I lost everything the moment you showed up? She turned and walked out, and for the first time since she locked me in that room, I didn't feel trapped anymore. I felt angry, I felt alive, and I was finally ready to fight back. The morning after the hearing, I made coffee and didn't finish it. It sat there on the counter, slowly going cold, just like I had been weeks. Something inside me had shifted at courtroom. It wasn't rage, it wasn't revenge, it was clarity. Finally, a moment where all the confusion, gaslighting, and manipulation collapsed into one painful truth. Claire hadn't broken down. She'd planned all of it, and she was damn near proud of it, until I showed up and refused to vanish. I wasn't going to vanish again, so I found a lawyer. Her name was Delia Harper. She was 39, former military, and had a stare that could turn a bouncer into a puddle. She didn't do the fake sympathy, no gentle hand on the shoulder. She listened, took notes, and only stopped me once, to ask if I had any documentation. No phone. She kept it. Email's all I've got. Good enough, she said, flipping her legal pad. Tell me everything, from day one. So I did. The locked door, the food under it, the forced separation document, the emotional mind games. Delia didn't blink once. When I told her Claire admitted it in court, her pen stopped. She admitted she locked you in? Straight to the judge. A small smirk broke the corner of her mouth. Good. That's leverage. Leverage for what? I don't even know what I'm fighting for. Delia leaned back in her chair. You're fighting for control, for your name, for your sanity. You're not here to win her back, Jason. You're here to take your spine off the shelf she tried to put it on. Damn. That line stuck with, hit me harder than I expected. She gave me a list of documents to request. Old joint bank statements. Voicemails if I could retrieve them. Anything she might have sent in writing. I went through every folder, every backup drive, every half-forgotten email thread. I even contacted a guy I knew who worked at our phone provider and got call logs and texts from the last 60 days. I found a thread. Claire had messaged her cousin a few days before the punishment. The message read, I'm going to do it this week. He won't see it coming. No detail, no timeline, but it was there. Intent. I printed it, highlighted it, took it straight to Delia. She looked it over. That's psychological abuse. Plain and simple. This wasn't a meltdown. This was a setup. She started building a case, not for divorce, not yet, but for legal separation with protective clauses. She wanted Claire to be restricted from making financial moves, from locking me out of property decisions, and most importantly, from erasing the narrative and painting herself as a victim in court. But none of it prepared me for what happened next. Claire showed up at my brother's house. It was 2 days after I hired Delia. I was in sweatpants, reheating leftover Thai food, when the doorbell rang. Noah opened it, and there she was, standing on the porch like a ghost who didn't get the memo that they were. She looked different, tired, smaller somehow. Not physically, but like something in her posture had sunk. Noah stepped back, arms crossed. You've got 5 minutes. She nodded, didn't argue, just stepped in and looked at me like she was seeing someone who escaped a cage she'd nailed shut. I shouldn't be, she said quietly, but I needed to say something before the next hearing. I didn't offer her a seat. I didn't even speak. I thought if I locked you away, you'd finally understand what it felt like, she continued. To be alone, ignored, shut out. I thought it was symbolic. Symbolic? I asked. Claire, you imprisoned me. I know. No, you planned it. She looked down. Yes. A long silence passed. I'm not proud of what I did, she finally said. But I was desperate. Desperate to what? Punish me. Control me. To wake you up, she said. You were already gone, Jason. You just hadn't left yet. My hands curled into fists at my sides. So your answer was to lock me in a room and treat me like a criminal? She shook her head. You think I didn't cry while you were in there? You think I didn't sit on the stairs every night, wondering if I'd gone too far? I stared at her, searching for the woman I used to love in the middle of this twisted explanation. You didn't just go too far, I said. You crossed a line and then built a damn house on the other side. She bit her voice broke for the first time. I didn't expect you to fight back. I thought you'd just sign the papers and go. And what? You'd get the house, the car, the story, and the sympathy? No, she said. But even she didn't. She reached into her coat and pulled out an envelope. I talked to my lawyer. I'm not pushing for full asset control anymore. I'm not going to fight the protective clause. I didn't touch the envelope. I'll see you in court, I said flatly. With my lawyer. Claire nodded, eyes shimmering. She turned to leave and paused. I miss us, she whispered. I didn't answer. That night, I sat on Noah's back porch, beer in hand, watching the wind scatter dead leaves across the lawn. The past month had felt like one long, slow-motion car crash. But for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like the guy getting hit. I felt like the one crawling out of the wreckage. The truth was, Claire had been right about one. I had checked out. But what she never understood was why. Marriage had become a series of unwinnable arguments. Every conversation was a trapdoor. I never knew what version of her I'd wake up to. Warm, affectionate Claire? Or passive-aggressive ticking time bomb Claire? Over time, I stopped responding. I stopped risking the wrong reaction. I chose silence because it felt safer. And in doing that, I left her in her own version of a locked room. But I didn't feed her sandwiches under a door. The next day, Delia filed for full protective separation. We added the cousin's message as evidence of intent. We submitted psychological impact statements. We requested that Claire's visitation to shared property be suspended until the next hearing. And then, 2 weeks later, I got an email from Claire's lawyer. She wanted to settle. No full divorce yet, but she was offering joint asset division, no alimony, and property arbitration through a mediator. No courtroom, no public drama. It was the legal version of, let's just stop fighting. Delia called me. Want to take it? I stared at the screen for a long time before answering. Yeah, I want out. Good, she said. But this time, you're walking through the front door, not being shoved out the back. Freedom is strange when you haven't had it in a while. Not the dramatic, patriotic kind. The quiet kind. The kind where no one is watching your movements, measuring your tone, or waiting to twist your next sentence into an indictment. For the first time in weeks, I woke up and didn't dread the day. No courthouse, no Claire, just the strange peace of sitting at my brother's kitchen table, drinking hot coffee that no one had poisoned with passive aggression. The silence wasn't heavy, it was healing. But healing has a way of being interrupted. Noah came home early from work, carrying a yellow padded envelope. This came to the office for you, he said, tossing it onto the table. No return address. I frowned. The handwriting was messy. All caps. I tore it open. Inside was a flash drive. No note, no explanation. Just a plain black USB. Something about it made the hair on my neck stand. I slid it into my laptop and opened the folder. It contained only one video. Record Cam 9. My heart kicked hard. I clicked play. The footage was grainy, shot from a ceiling, looked like a living room camera. My living room. Claire had installed cameras after a break-in 2 years ago, but she never mentioned keeping the interior ones running. At first, the room was empty. Then Claire walked in, wearing the same gray cardigan she'd had on the day she locked me. She was on the phone, and she was smiling. Her voice came through the speakers, muffled but clear. He has no idea. None, she laughed. I already moved the router and disabled his backup. He's locked in with zero access. A pause. No, I'm not worried. Even if he flips out, there's no bruises, no marks. It'll look like emotional distance. Judges eat that up. My stomach. She wasn't venting. She wasn't breaking down. She was performing. She was engineering the narrative in real time, piece by piece. I watched as she walked over to the door, my door, and pressed her ear against it. Still quiet, she said into the phone. He's probably still trying to figure it out. Give it a day or two. I'll wear him down, then give him the paper. He'll sign just to get out. She turned and looked right into the camera, then winked. My hands were shaking. Noah walked in, saw my face. What is it? I didn't answer. I just replayed the video twice. By the third time, he sat down across from me, silent, still. I'm going to bury her with this, I said. Noah nodded slowly. You're damn right you. Delia nearly jumped through the phone when I told her. Jason, this changes everything. This isn't just manipulation. This is calculated abuse. And now we have visual proof. She filed a motion the same day. We requested a formal psychological evaluation. We submitted the footage as new evidence. And we pushed for a full court review of the original separation agreement, claiming it was signed under duress and deception. Claire's lawyer responded within 48 hours. They wanted to meet privately. Delia said no. This isn't a negotiation anymore, she told me. This is damage control. For them. And I want them scared. I'll admit it. There was a moment where I wanted to gloat. To send Claire a screenshot. To message her and say, wink at the camera now, sweetheart. But I didn't. Because what I felt, more than anger, was grief. The woman in that video wasn't a stranger. It was the same woman I held through panic attacks. the one I carried over the threshold, the one I thought I'd grow old beside. And she'd turned me into a villain in a story she authored herself. The next court hearing was different. Claire looked off, not disheveled, just brittle, like glass under pressure. She didn't speak. Her lawyer did. But even she seemed less polished this time, less smug. There was a new tightness in her jaw. Delia stood and laid everything out. The footage, the timing, the audio, the plan. She didn't embellish. Didn't need to. The video did the work for her. The judge asked Claire directly, "Did you record that footage?" Claire nodded once. "And you sent it to your husband?" A pause. Then, "No, I don't know who did." That part was technically believable. I hadn't told anyone I had it. Maybe she never expected the cameras to turn against her. The judge turned back to Delia. "How was it obtained?" Delia kept it. "Anonymous delivery, Your Honor. No hacking, no coercion." The judge leaned back, exhaled slowly and said, "This changes the tone of the proceedings." You could feel the air shift in the room. Claire's face stayed frozen. Her hands gripped the armrests like she was anchoring herself to the moment. Then came the twist I didn't see coming. As the judge began reviewing next steps, Claire suddenly stood. "Your Honor, may I say something?" Her lawyer turned, eyes wide. "Claire." The judge nodded. "Go ahead." Claire looked right at me. "I wasn't going to send the footage," she said. "I had a copy saved for leverage, yes, but I didn't think I'd need it." She looked down, took a breath. "I wanted him to feel powerless, because that's how I felt for years. I wanted him to know what it's like to be ignored." Delia started to object, but the judge held up a hand. Claire went on. "I didn't plan to keep him locked up for just long enough to break the rhythm, to make him listen. But it got out of hand, and I lost control of the story." Her voice cracked. Not a performance this time. The courtroom was dead quiet. "And now I'm the monster, and maybe I deserve that." She sat down, and I realized something I didn't expect. She wasn't just trying to punish me back then. She was trying to make me the version of myself she always believed I was. Distant, detached, disposable. Because if I turned into that, she didn't have to mourn me. She could just hate me, and that made leaving easier for her. The judge cleared his throat. "I'm not ruling today," he said, "but I'm moving this case to a formal custody-style track. We'll handle this like a high-conflict divorce with psychological review. Mr. Reese, your claims are valid and will be addressed. Miss Reese, your admission is noted." Gavel. Done. For now. Outside, the air felt different, colder, cleaner. I stood on the courthouse steps, watching people drift by like nothing world-shattering had happened behind those walls. Delia joined me, sunglasses on, case folder in hand. "You want to settle now?" she asked. "Or do you want the long war?" I thought for a long time. "No more wars," I said. "Just boundaries." She smiled. "I can work with that." And as we walked toward her car, I realized the story Claire tried to write for me had failed. Because I wasn't the villain, and I wasn't the victim either. I was just the man who refused to vanish. You don't realize how much trauma lingers in everyday things until a simple door closing behind you makes your stomach twist. After everything Claire put me through, I developed this low-grade paranoia, like I could be trapped again, just by accident. Locked in, shut out, cut off. Even now, weeks after the court hearing, my body still responded to shadows like they were threats. Delia kept pressing forward with the legal separation. Claire didn't contest anything, not the asset division, not the psychological review order, not even the part about supervised mediation sessions. Her lawyer stopped grandstanding and started emailing everything with the tone of a white flag. I should have felt victorious, but all I felt was hollow. Until that Sunday, I was staying alone now, renting a small apartment while figuring out where. Baltimore felt like a pit stop, not a destination. I didn't want to live in the same city as Claire, but part of me wasn't ready to run either. I needed time, space, stillness. Then the knock came. 3 short taps. No buzz, no call ahead. I opened the door cautiously, and there she was. Mara, Claire's younger sister. I hadn't seen her in at least 2 years. She used to live in Phoenix, always on the road for chasing freelance photography gigs that took her to every edge of the country. She'd crash with us sometimes, always smelling like desert air and truck stop coffee. She was loud, honest, impossible to. Now she stood there in jeans and a leather jacket, holding a paper bag and a tired smile. "Can I come in?" I blinked. "Did Claire send you?" She shook her head. "Nope. She'd probably have a panic attack if she knew I was." I stepped aside and let her in. She placed the paper bag on my kitchen counter and looked around the apartment like she was taking inventory of my new life. "Nice place. Very post-apocalyptic bachelor." I chuckled. "Yeah. Decorated it myself in emotional damage gray." She smiled, thin, genuine, then turned serious. "I saw the footage." My stomach dropped. "Claire showed you?" "No," she said. "It wasn't her." I narrowed my eyes. "Who sent it to you?" She leaned on the counter. "Her cousin. The same one she was texting before she locked you up. I guess guilt finally caught up with him. Or maybe he just likes chaos." I exhaled. "So now you know." I always suspected, Mara said quietly. She's my sister, Jason, but even I couldn't pretend she was okay. She used to practice arguments in the mirror when she was a kid. Whole conversation. Sometimes she'd cry just to see if she could do it without blinking. That hit me harder than I expected. She wasn't always like this, I said, half defending, half regretting it. Mara shook her head. No, she always was. You just couldn't see it. That's not your fault. People like her, they don't break loudly. They chip away at themselves in private, and by the time someone notices, they've already rewritten the story. I sat down at the table. She almost convinced me I was the problem, that I deserved it. She wanted you to believe that, Mara said, because if you were the bad guy, then she didn't have to face what she'd become. I looked at her. So why are you here? She hesitated, then pulled something from her bag. A worn leather journal, edges frayed. Because she wrote this. And I think you should read it. She slid it across the table. My name was on the cover, scrawled in ink, not printed, written, by her. I didn't touch it. Mara sat down across from me. After the court date, she kind of collapsed. Not literally, but mentally. She locked herself in our parents' lake house. No phone, no internet. She brought a stack of journals and started writing. I went to check on her. Found this one sitting on the kitchen counter. She didn't try to hide it. Why are you giving it to me? I asked. Because maybe you need closure. Or maybe you need to know how deep her delusion went. Either way, she's not going to give you an apology. But she left you something, and for what it's worth, she doesn't hate you. That makes one of us, I muttered. Mara stood. You don't have to forgive her. Hell, I don't. But if you want to move on without dragging that weight behind you, maybe it helps to know what she thought she was doing. She paused at the door. You survived her, she said softly. That already makes you stronger than most. She left, and I stared at the journal like it might explode. It took me hours to open it. Not because I was afraid of what was inside, but because part of me still wanted to pretend she didn't think any deeper than. But Claire had always been complex, and dangerous complexity was harder to hate than outright malice. The journal wasn't long, 30 pages, neat handwriting, scattered thoughts, a confessional. She talked about feeling invisible, about how I stopped looking at her the way I used to, about how the silence in our marriage felt like being slowly erased. There was pain in those pages, real pain, but also self-pity, rewrites of events that didn't happen the way she described them. Then there was this. When I locked him in the guest room, I thought I was making a point, but after the second day, I wasn't trying to teach him anymore. I was trying to punish him for leaving me emotionally, years before he ever packed a bag. That one hit like a brick. She knew. She knew it was wrong. She knew it wasn't therapy. It wasn't symbolic. It was revenge. And still, she did it. The last page was different, short, written in a rush. If you're reading this, Jason, I want you to know that you weren't crazy. I gaslit you. I controlled you. I hated myself for needing you and resented you for pulling away. I thought if I broke you, it would make me whole again. It didn't. I closed the book, sat there in silence. No tears, no anger, just stillness. The next day, I gave the journal to Delia. She archived it, said it would strengthen the psychological abuse narrative in any future filing. But to me, it didn't feel like evidence anymore. It felt like an obituary, not of Claire, of our marriage. Because even if she begged for forgiveness in the courtroom, or admitted every misdeed under oath, the person I married was gone. She'd been gone long before the door clicked shut behind me, and I was done waiting for her to come back. Moving on is a funny phrase. It sounds active, like a decision you make, like packing a bag and walking toward a better view. But it's not like that at all. Moving on is more like learning to live with a ghost you can't quite exorcise. You don't move on. You just learn not to flinch when the memories sneak up behind you. After Mara gave me Claire's journal, things inside me started shifting, slowly, uneasily. The journal didn't make me forgive her, not even close. But it did shine a light on something I'd been refusing to look at, me. It's easy to call yourself the victim when someone locks you in a room and feeds you like a zoo exhibit. It's easy when there's video footage and court dates and lawyers talking about psychological damage. But in the quiet moments, when the dishes are done and the apartment is still, you start asking yourself uncomfortable things. Why didn't I see it coming? Why didn't I leave sooner? And the hardest one, what did I do to make it so easy for her to turn me into a ghost before she locked the door? That's where I was when Sarah called. We hadn't spoken in years. She was an old friend from college, someone who knew me before the salary, before the house, before I became Claire's husband. We used to be close, maybe too close for Claire's comfort, which is probably why I stopped calling. Her number popped up on my phone like a surprise quiz. Sarah, why? I almost didn't answer, but I did. Jason? Her voice sounded the same, warm, curious, like a question mark always lived at the end of every word. Hey, I said. Wow, it's been a while. I heard about everything, she said gently. Mara told me, of course. Mara. Guess it made the rounds, I replied, trying to sound casual. I don't know what to say except, I'm sorry, and I'm really glad you got out. Thanks. A pause. Want to grab coffee? No pressure. No therapy session. Just caffeine and catching up. I hesitated. I hadn't had a real conversation with someone unconnected to the legal case or my trauma in months. Yeah, I said. Actually, yeah, I'd like that. We met at a little coffee shop tucked between a bookstore and a yoga studio. The kind of place that smells like cinnamon and broken dream. I was 10 minutes early. She was right on time. Sarah walked in wearing a long green coat and a smile that didn't feel forced. She gave me a hug, a real one, the kind that didn't carry pity or obligation. We sat by the window, and for the first 15 minutes, we didn't talk about Claire. We talked about nothing. Old professors, mutual friends, how we both still couldn't properly fold a fitted sheet. Then came the silence. The one that lingers when both people know something heavier is coming. You look tired, she said finally. I laughed. That bad? No, just worn, like someone who's been carrying something for too long. I have. She stirred her drink. Want to talk about it? I did. And I didn't. But I did anyway. I told her everything. Not the courtroom version. Not the legally phrased, pain-sanitized version. The real one. The parts I hadn't even said out loud to Delia. The slow decline. The arguments that weren't arguments. Just silence and avoidance. The way Claire disappeared into control. When I was done, she didn't offer advice. She didn't try to fix anything. She just sat there and said, "You know, I remember when you used to show up." I blinked. What? You used to show up for people. You listened. You gave a damn. Somewhere along the way, you stopped. That hit harder than any punch Claire had thrown. Are you saying I deserved it? I asked, trying not to sound defensive. No, she said calmly. No one deserves what happened to you. But you're asking the wrong question. Which is, what part of you let it keep happening? I stared at her. I don't mean in a victim-blaming way, she said quickly. I mean, you knew something was broken. Maybe not at the start, but eventually. And you stayed. Why? I looked out the window. I guess I thought it would fix itself. She nodded. That's the problem. You were waiting for someone else to save the relationship you were also letting rot. I didn't reply. I couldn't. Because she was right. I wasn't the monster. But I wasn't the hero either. I was the guy who shut down when things got hard. The guy who buried resentment under logic and called it maturity. The guy who left his wife emotionally alone and got surprised when she became a stranger. I didn't build the cage she locked me in, but I did lay down the foundation. Sarah reached across the table, hand resting lightly on mine. Jason, you don't have to carry all the blame, but you do have to carry your share if you want to heal. That night, I sat in bed and wrote it down. All of it. Not for court, not for Claire, for me. I wrote about how I stopped trying after our second miscarriage. How I used work to feel important because I no longer felt needed at home. How I let Claire's sharp edges grow without ever confronting her, because I thought peace was more important than truth. How I let us become roommates, because I was afraid of who we'd be if we actually talked. It wasn't an apology, it was a confession. I had to see it on paper to believe. The next morning, I woke up before the alarm, made breakfast, went for a walk, and realized I didn't feel like a ghost anymore. I wasn't healed, but I wasn't haunted. You can be doing fine, better. You can have your head above water, breathing, functioning, making peace with your story. And then something small comes along, like a paper cut you never saw coming, and suddenly you're bleeding again. For me, that paper cut was an email. I'd just gotten back from my second therapy session. My new therapist, Danielle, was a soft-spoken woman with sharp questions and no tolerance for self-pity. She asked things like, what part of you needed the control she offered? And what's scarier, loneliness or honesty? Stuff that leaves you blinking at the wall long after the session ends. I was making progress. The kind of progress that doesn't look like much on the outside. Sleeping through the night, not flinching when someone closes a door, making eye contact with myself in the mirror. Then I checked my inbox. The sender hit me like a punch to the chest. Claire.Reese, legaloutlook.com. For a second, I thought it was her lawyer. Then I saw the subject line. I need to tell you something. Please read it all. I almost deleted it. My finger hovered over the trash icon. Every rational instinct said, don't open it. You don't owe her that. Let it rot in the digital void where her apology should have lived years ago. But my hand didn't listen. I clicked. Jason, I know I have no right to reach out like this. You told me everything would go through lawyers. You made it clear you don't want contact. I've respected that. But this isn't about the case. It's not about court or property or who gets what. It's about something I remembered. I've been seeing a therapist. Not because the court told me to. Because I finally hit a wall even I couldn't lie my way through. I've been writing everything down, sorting through it, and something came back to me. Something I pushed down for years. It's about us. Not the end. The beginning. Do you remember our first apartment in Seattle? That tiny one-bedroom with the broken radiator and the downstairs neighbor who used to sing opera at 2 a.m.? One night, You were sick, fever, shaking, borderline delirious. I tried to convince you to go to urgent care, but you wouldn't. Said you'd tough it out. I stayed up all night cooling your forehead with wet towels. I held you when you shook. I sat on the floor next to the bed reading aloud to keep you grounded. You don't remember most of it. You told me later it was all a blur. But I do. I remember every second. That night I thought, this is it. This is love. This is what forever feels like. Somewhere along the way, I lost that. Maybe you did too. Maybe we both did. But Jason, I'm sorry for what I did to you. I'm sorry I turned our home into a prison. I'm sorry I humiliated you in court. I'm sorry I let my hurt become cruelty. And I'm sorry I expected you to fix a broken version of me I refuse to acknowledge. I'm not asking for anything. Not forgiveness. Not a response. I just needed you to know that the woman who locked you in that room is not proud of herself. And the woman who read to you on that feverish night still exists. Somewhere. I hope you're okay. Claire. I stared at the screen for a long time. No anger. No tears. Just a strange, heavy ache. Like an old wound twitching in the rain. It was everything I had wanted her to say. 6 months ago. Not now. Now it felt like a door cracking after I'd already built a new. I didn't know what to do. I closed the laptop and left the apartment. Walked without a destination for an hour. Just the sound of my shoes on pavement and the churn of thoughts I couldn't sort fast enough. That night, I didn't sleep. Not because of nightmares. Because of memory. She was right about that apartment. The radiator did scream. The neighbor did sing. And I did have that feeling. I remembered her voice reading a dog-eared copy of The Alchemist while I faded in and out of consciousness. I remembered the way her hand never left my back. I remembered thinking, just for a second, that I'd found the person who'd stay through anything. And that memory messed with me more than any of the bad ones. Because it was real. Because not everything between us had been broken. Because there had been something there once that was true. I brought the email to therapy. Danielle read it quietly, then set the printout aside. Well, she said, how do you feel? I don't know. She nodded. That's honest. She said all the right things, I added, but it still felt late. Too late? I shrugged. Does it matter? She leaned forward slightly. It might. I stayed quiet. Danielle spoke gently. Jason, forgiving someone doesn't mean excusing them. It doesn't mean letting them back in. It means releasing them. From your mind, from your heart, from your future. I don't know if I can. Then don't force it, she said. But don't carry her with you either. She's not your burden and that line hit. She's not your burden and I didn't reply to the email. Not that day, not the next. But I did write something. Not to send, just to say it. Claire, I remember that night too. And you're right. That was love. And it still matters. But love without safety is a weapon. And you used it on me. I'm glad you're getting help. I hope you find peace. But I won't walk backward to meet you. Whatever version of me you're trying to reach, he doesn't live in that room. Take care, Jason. I folded the letter, burned it in a bowl, watched the ashes curl and collapse into silence. It didn't feel like a victory. It felt like a funeral. Not for her. Not for us. For the weight I didn't realize I was still carrying. I never planned to stay in Baltimore this long. Originally, I thought 2 months tops. Just enough time to stop hearing her voice in every hallway of my brain. But then 2 months turned into 3 started to feel like roots. Still, I knew I couldn't live in limbo, so I made a list. Step 1. Finish the legal paperwork. Step 2. Find a new apartment. Not a temporary one. Something mine. Step 3. Start over. Easy on paper. But when you're rebuilding after a storm, the hammer always feels heavier than the blueprint suggests. Delia called with good news. Claire wasn't contesting the mediation. Her lawyer submitted everything we'd asked for. No last-minute stunts, no drama. It was like Claire had finally decided to disappear. And honestly, that was the most merciful thing she could have done. I should have celebrated. Instead, I went to an art gallery. Weird choice, I know. But something in me needed to be surrounded by people creating instead of destroying. I hadn't been to a gallery in years, not since Claire dragged me to one in Chicago and spent the whole afternoon pretending to understand sculptures shaped like upside-down cacti. This one was smaller, local, the kind of place that served cheap wine in plastic cups and smelled faintly of paint and desperation. I wandered from piece to piece, not really reading the placard, just letting color and texture do what therapy couldn't. And then I heard someone behind me say, "Looks like a nervous breakdown on canvas." I turned. She was standing with her arms crossed, looking at the same chaotic mess of reds and grays that I'd just been pretending to understand. She wore dark jeans, black boots, and a mustard-colored coat that looked like it belonged on someone who knew exactly who. Her hair was tied up with a pencil, a literal pencil. She glanced at me. "You agree?" I raised an eyebrow. "About the breakdown?" "Yeah. I mean, if this painting could talk, it would say, 'Please stop texting your ex.'" I laughed. First real laugh in weeks. It caught me off guard. "Jason," I said, offering my hand. She shook it. "Evelyn," And just like that, the room felt warmer. We walked through the rest of the gallery. Turns out she was a graphic designer, freelance. Moved to Baltimore from Asheville 3 years ago after a bad breakup and a worse job. She liked loud music, spicy food, and made a sport out of mocking pretentious artists, which, considering where we were, made her an Olympic contender. The conversation wasn't flirtatious. Not really. It was easy, effortless in the way most things haven't been for me. Eventually, we sat on a bench near the exit, watching a video installation loop 1,000 flickering frames of city life. She asked, "You live around here?" "For now," I said. "In between lives, I guess." She didn't press. Just nodded like she understood more than she let on. We didn't exchange numbers. No promises. No, "Let's grab coffee sometime." Just a smile and a "Nice meeting you." And then she was gone, coat fluttering behind her like a bookmark slipping out of a well-read novel. I stood there for a long time after, not because I was thinking about her, because I was thinking about me, and how it had felt to be seen by someone who didn't already know the worst parts of my story. Later that night, I told Danielle, my therapist, about Evelyn. "Do you feel guilty for talking to her?" she asked. I paused. "I think I feel guilty for enjoying it." Danielle smiled. "That makes sense. You're used to associating closeness with consequences." I nodded slowly. Claire weaponized intimacy. Now I treat comfort like it's a red flag. "So," she said gently, "what would it look like to let yourself be seen again, without the fear?" "I don't know." But the idea stayed with me. What if I could be known, without being controlled? A week passed before I saw Evelyn, this time at a used bookstore. I was browsing the philosophy section, thumbing through a dog-eared copy of The Art of War. Not because I needed it, but because I still felt like I was in a war with Sun Tzu, huh? She said from behind me. I turned, grinning. "You stalking me?" She held up her own book, The Ethics of Ambiguity by Simone de Beauvoir. "If I were stalking you, I'd at least pretend to read something fun." We grabbed coffee next door, sat in the corner by the window, talked for 2 hours. It didn't feel like a date, it felt like breathing. She asked about my work. I told her I was consulting part-time for a tech company while figuring out my next move. She told me she'd just fired a client who refused to pay her and replaced them with an indie food magazine that let her design pizza spreads. "I'd rather be broke and free," she said. I understood that more than I wanted to admit. Eventually, the conversation turned to relationships. Carefully, respectfully. She mentioned her ex, a 5-year relationship that ended with betrayal and therapy. "I stayed a year too long," she said, sipping her drink, "because I thought leaving meant I failed." I nodded. "I stayed too, for the same reason, and maybe because I was scared of what I'd find outside the door." She tilted her head. "You don't talk like someone who's bitter. I've had a lot of practice." She didn't ask for details, and I didn't offer it. We just sat there, two people with matching scars, trying not to pick at them. When I got home, I didn't spiral. I didn't question whether I'd betrayed some imagined loyalty to Claire. Instead, I sat at my desk and wrote a letter to myself. Not a journal entry, a letter. "Dear Jason, you did not deserve what happened to you, but you do deserve what comes next. Not everyone will try to control you. Not everyone will weaponize your vulnerability. Some people just want to see you whole. And you don't need to apologize for wanting to be seen. You are not broken. You are rebuilding, and you are allowed to feel something new. Don't run from it. Walk toward it, one step at a time." I thought I was past it. That was the mistake. Not in thinking I'd healed completely. No, I knew better than. But in believing the past had finally run out of ways to find me. It was a Wednesday. I'd started freelance work, consulting on systems design for a startup in Chicago. I was slowly getting used to having a routine again, something that resembled a real life. Coffee in the morning, laptop hum, phone calls that didn't make my chest tighten. I was even sleeping through the night. So when the email came through, again from Claire, I didn't panic. I stared at the screen for a while. The subject line was short. Request. The message itself was only 2 sentences. "Jason, I know I have no right to ask this, but I need a favor. Can we talk? Just once? In person." No signature, no Claire. Just the cold, impersonal font of Gmail spelling out the words like they were typed from a bunker. I didn't reply. Not immediately. I stared at it for an hour, then forwarded it to Delia. She called me within 10 minutes. "You don't owe her anything," she said, her tone clipped. "I know. You have the legal separation. You have the property agreement. There's nothing left she can do." "I know." She hesitated. "But you're thinking about it." "Yeah," she sighed. "You've come a long way, Jason. Don't let her drag you back into the mud just because she learned how to cry at the right time." I appreciated the warning, truly, but something inside me needed to hear the ask. So I wrote back. One conversation. Public place. 15 minutes. She responded within the hour. We met at Patterson Park. Early evening. Cold breeze. Sky streaked orange with sunset. I chose a bench near the duck pond. Wide open. People passing every few minutes. No chance of being alone in any threatening way. Claire arrived right on time. She looked different. Not worse. Not better. Just like someone who'd been stripped of illusion. The way you look after the mask becomes too heavy and finally slides off your face for good. "Thanks for coming," she said, sitting a polite distance away. I didn't reply. Just watch the ducks. She exhaled slowly. "I've been going to therapy twice a week. Court mandated at first. Voluntary now." I nodded once. "I've been journaling too. About what happened. About you. About what I became." Silence. She reached into her coat and pulled out a small envelope. Not thick. Just one sheet of paper inside. "This is what I wanted to ask." I didn't take it. "Just say it." She swallowed. "My therapist suggested I write a formal statement about what I did to you, for the record. Not just the legal record, but the psychological. She said it might help both of us if I gave it to you officially." I stared at the pond. "That's what this is?" I asked. She nodded. "It's signed, dated, typed. Not just an apology, a confession. Acknowledging the emotional and psychological harm I caused. You can file it with your case. Or burn it. I don't care. I just need you to have it." Still, I didn't take the because her face said there was more, and I was right. She looked at her hand, picked at a loose thread on her sleeve. "I'm applying for a teaching position," she said. "Community college, part-time. I have to go through an ethics review board because of the court history. And, if you gave a statement, just a neutral one, saying we've closed things amicably, it might help." There it was. The favor. The real reason. I let the silence stretch, then finally asked, "You want me to help you clear your name?" "No," she said quickly. "Not clear it. Just soften it. I know I won't get a glowing review. I'm not asking for praise. Just mercy." I turned to look at her then, and for the first time, I wasn't seeing the woman who locked me in a room. I was seeing someone who had to live with herself. That was punishment enough, but it wasn't mine to carry. "You're not the villain in my life anymore," I said. She blinked. "Then who am I?" "No one," I replied. "And that's the best gift I can give either of us." She flinched. I finally took the envelope, slid it into my coat. "I'm not sending a letter to your ethics board," I said. "That's between you and them." Her mouth tightened, but she nodded. "I understand." We sat in silence another minute. Then she said something unexpected. "You look better." I gave a humorless smile. "Freedom suits me." She stood, hugged herself against the wind. "Take care, Jason. You too." She walked away slowly. Didn't look. Later that night, I opened the envelope. The statement was clinical but honest. No poetic language, no manipulation, just a list of events and acknowledgments. It read like a record, not a plea. I filed it, not for court, for me, as a marker. The end of the line. A week later, I got a text from Evelyn. "Hey stranger, want to see something beautiful and weird?" I replied, "Only if there's pizza after." She sent a picture of a neon-lit jellyfish sculpture and a thumbs up. I stared at her message for a while, and realized I wasn't afraid to answer any. I wasn't carrying the past like a weight. I wasn't wondering what Claire would think. She was no longer in the passenger seat, or the rearview mirror. She was gone, and for the first time, I knew I wasn't. I never thought a jellyfish sculpture would change my life. It stood about 5 feet tall, built from recycled glass and steel, glowing like a beacon inside an old converted warehouse turned art installation. The exhibit was called Weightless Things. Ironic, considering how heavy I felt walking in. Evelyn stood beside me, sipping cheap white wine from a plastic cup. Her cheeks were pink from the cold. She wore that same mustard-colored coat, the one that somehow made her look untouchably confident and completely down to earth at the same time. "You hate it?" she asked, teasing. "No," I said. "I think I envy it." She tilted her head. "The jellyfish? It floats. It glows. It's made of trash and still gets a spotlight. That's aspirational." She laughed, and for a second I did too. We wandered past installations, one that played ambient forest sounds through copper pipes, another with mirrors that only reflected you if you stood completely still. Every piece felt like it was designed to say, "Sit with yourself, no distractions." We ended the night walking back to her place. Not because it was expected, because it felt inevitable. It was the first time I'd been in someone else's space since leaving Claire. The air smelled like cedarwood candles and basil. Her cat, Otis, glared at me from a shelf like a furry security guard. She handed me a blanket and let me choose the movie. I picked an old indie film neither of us paid attention to. Somewhere between scene transitions and a half-finished bottle of wine, she rested her head on my shoulder, and I froze. Not because I didn't want her, but because I did. And wanting someone, that scared the hell out of me. We didn't sleep together that night. I stayed on the couch. She didn't ask why. She didn't push. Just gave me a soft, "Good night, Jason," and closed her bedroom door without making it feel like an ending. I didn't sleep much. Not because of discomfort, because of fear. Not fear of her. Fear of what might happen if this went right. In therapy the next day, Danielle asked the question I'd been dodging. "Do you trust her?" "I don't know," I said. I barely trust myself. She nodded. That's honest. I feel like, if I let myself get close, I'm inviting another lock on the door, another betrayal, and this time, I don't think I'd come back from it. Danielle didn't sugarcoat. She never did. You're not afraid of her hurting you, she said. You're afraid of you not seeing it coming. That landed like a brick, because it was true. Claire didn't just damage my faith in love. She damaged my faith in my judgment. What if I misread Evelyn, too? What if the warning signs came wrapped in warmth, again? A few days later, Evelyn invited me to her place for dinner. Homemade lasagna. The real kind, with layers and cheese and the kind of garlic smell that sinks into your clothes for We sat on her rug, plates on our laps, soft music playing in the background. She told me about a client who ghosted halfway through a magazine. I told her about a corporate call that went off the rails when the CEO's dog knocked over his webcam. It felt normal, it felt safe, and that terrified me. Halfway through the night she asked, "Are you always this careful?" I didn't pretend to misunderstand. I wasn't always, I said, but I had to become. She nodded slowly, setting her wine glass down. Can I ask something personal? Of course. When was the last time you felt completely okay with being vulnerable? I didn't answer right away, not because I didn't have one, but because I knew exactly when. It was years ago, before the locks, before the silence, before Claire stopped looking me in the eye during dinner. We were on a camping trip, middle of nowhere, no signal, just stars and a fire and 2 cans of chili. Claire had looked at me that night like I was everything good in the world. That was the last time I didn't hold a part of myself back. I don't know, I finally told Evelyn, and she didn't try to fix it. She just moved closer, pressed her forehead gently against mine, and whispered, "It's okay to be scared. I just want to know the real version, even if he's messy." It wasn't a line, it was a lifeline. I let out a shaky breath, and then I kissed her. Not a movie kiss. No soundtrack. No perfectly angled lighting. Just 2 people leaning in. Quiet, careful, real. We moved to her bedroom. She didn't rush. Neither did I. Every gesture was a question. Every touch was permission. There were no games, no performance. It was the first time I made love without guilt in my chest, and the first time I felt like I didn't have to earn it by suffering. Afterward, I laid there staring at her ceiling, fingers tracing circles on her shoulder. She was already half asleep, but she whispered, "Still scared?" "Yeah," I said. She smiled into the pillow. "Good. Means it matters." The next morning, I made coffee while she showered. Otis gave me a look that said, "I'm watching you, human," and then curled into a box that was clearly too small for his bulk. I sipped from her chipped mug, looking out her window at the quiet street below, and I realized something. The fear hadn't gone, but it didn't rule me anymore. I had stepped into the fire, and I hadn't burned. Later, we walked to the market together, bought fresh bread and blueberries and argued about whether green apples were evil. I say yes. She disagreed. It was so but that's what made it feel miraculous, because for so long, I thought I'd never feel ordinary again without it hurting. Now, it just felt right. Not perfect, but possible. That night, I wrote in my journal, "Today I let someone in, and I didn't apologize. I didn't explain it. I just did it." She didn't ask for the broken parts of me be fixed. She just asked me to stop hiding them, and for the first time in a long time, I think I'm starting to believe I'm lovable, even with the scars, especially with the scars. They say closure isn't something you get from someone else. It's something you give yourself. That never made much sense to me, until now. It's been 6 months since I last saw Claire. 8 since the door first clicked behind me. A year since the slow erosion of my marriage became something I could no longer ignore. And I don't think about her every day anymore. That's how I know I'm healed. I still have the envelope she gave me at the park, the formal statement. It's tucked away in a folder I don't open. I don't need to. I don't need her words anymore to validate the damage, or the survival, or the fight. I lived it. That's enough. But this story, my story, isn't about her, and it hasn't been for a while. I moved out of Baltimore last month, not to run, to begin. I found a small apartment in Asheville. Nothing fancy. White walls, squeaky floors, a balcony with just enough space for a chair, and a stubborn little cactus that refuses to die. Evelyn helped me move. She brought takeout and made me laugh when I couldn't find my socks for 3 straight days. We're not rushing anything. No ultimatums, no titles, just presence. A kind of quiet loyalty that doesn't need to be. She knows everything, not just the court-approved version. The whole thing. The dark parts. The parts I'm not proud of. The parts I didn't understand until therapy forced me to say them out loud. She didn't flinch. Didn't offer to fix me. Didn't walk away either. She just said, "Thanks for trusting me with." That was enough. I've started writing again. Not journaling. Actual writing. A collection of essays. Not about trauma. Not directly. About resilience. About the weird, quiet ways we survive the worst things and then keep going like we didn't just walk through fire barefoot. One of the essays is called The Guest Room. I haven't decided if I'll publish it, but it's there. And maybe someday it'll help someone else who wakes up and realizes they're living in a life that's slowly erasing them. My brother Noah came to visit last week. We grilled steaks on the tiny balcony and drank too much beer. He told me he was proud of me, then called me a corny bastard when I got too emotional. But when he left, he hugged me longer than you. And I think we both understood what that meant. Survival doesn't just change you. It changes the people who love you. They don't just watch you crawl out of the wreckage. They help carry the pieces. I've been sleeping, not perfectly, but most nights, I wake up once, and then fall back asleep. That might not sound like much. But to someone who used to flinch at creaking floorboards and door handles, it's a kind of miracle. And when I wake up next to Evelyn, sometimes with her foot buried in my ribcage like a sleepy ninja, I smile. Because this time, the door is open, and I'm free to leave any time I want. But I stay, because I want to, not because I'm afraid not. I've learned some things that I didn't know before the locks, before the courts, before I watched someone I loved twist my silence into justification for cruelty. Here's what I know. Love isn't control. Love isn't fear wrapped in affection. Love isn't earned by shrinking. And silence is not peace. If you have to disappear to survive a relationship, it's not a relationship. It's a prison with furniture. I sometimes wonder what Claire is doing now. Not in a longing way, in a human way. I hope she's still in therapy. I hope she found something real inside herself. Not the story she tried to write about me, but the one she refused to look at. And I hope she finds peace. But I don't hope she comes, because I'm not waiting at the door anymore. A few weeks ago, Evelyn and I hiked up Black Balsam Knob. It's not a hard trail, but it's steep in places. About halfway up, my legs started burning. I almost turned back. She looked at me and said, "You don't have to keep up. Just keep going." And that stuck with me. Because that's how healing works too. You don't have to get there fast. You just have to keep going. When we reached the summit, I stood on the edge of the rocks, wind punching my jacket, and I realized something that I had waited a long time to I like the version of me that survived. Not the angry one, not the broken one, the one who didn't vanish when someone tried to erase him, the one who said no, the one who walked out of a locked room with his head held high. The last time Claire and I ever spoke, really spoke, was on that park bench. I've thought about that moment a lot. The request, the apology, and the silence that followed. But the thing that sticks with me the most isn't what she said. It's what I didn't. I didn't say "I forgive you," because at the time, I didn't. But now I understand that forgiveness isn't a gift for them. It's freedom for me. So Claire, if you're out there, still writing, still searching, still aching, I forgive you. Not because you earned it, but because I no longer need to carry you with me. This is the version I kept. The version who loves again. The version who trusts again. The version who found joy in lasagna and midnight movie marathon and holding someone's hand without needing to brace for impact. This is the version who chose not to be defined by what was done to him, but by what he did next. My name is Jason, and I am not what she did to me. I am what I did to escape. I am what I chose to become. And finally, I'm free.